Let's meet our lucky contestants. First on the green team, we have Dorothy Zbornak, an English teacher originally from Brooklyn, New York. She now lives in Miami with her mother, who will gladly pay anyone who will take her out for a date. Our second contestant is an artist with an incredible body. She runs her own museum, speaks Chinese, and hopes to sail around the world before she turns 40. Wow, that must be a typo. Welcome, Blanche Devereaux. Our next contestant is a family counselor. She originally hails from St. Olaf, Minnesota, where she was voted the girl most likely to get stuck in a tuba. Welcome, Rose Nyland. And last but not least is a grandmother of 6, Sophia Petrollo. Sophia, it says here that you and Dorothy are mother and daughter.
No, Guy. Rose is my daughter now. And you, Dorothy, are the biggest disappointment to hit the streets since the AMC Pacer.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maeda.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood. Brad, picture it. Hollywood, 1990. A handsome young aspiring actor with dreams of Hollywood stardom has been toiling away for over a year, working to make his dreams come true, sending out photos, going on auditions, making the humiliating rounds. Then one day, out of the blue, the telephone at his North Hollywood apartment rings, and the voice on the other end of the phone says, "My name is Kent Zbornak. I have your picture in front of me, and I'd like you to come in for an interview for our TV show." The young actor is speechless. Not only is it one of his most popular shows on TV, it's one of his favorites. The young actor summons up the courage to say yes, and reports to the studio the very next day. Brad, that TV show was The Golden Girls. And that young actor's name was Jason Priestley. No, I'm kidding. It was me. It was me. I was on Golden Girls.
How many lines did you get?
Let's not talk about it. Hey, everybody. That is a true story. It's a very true story.
And his last name was Zbornak, or did you...
Kent Zbornak. Kent Zbornak was the stage manager of the Golden Girls.
Oh.
That's where the name, yes, he was a friend of Susan Harris's, and she loved his last name, and that's how Dorothy Zbornak and Stan Zbornak got their name, from Kent Zbornak. Yeah, he was a great guy. Yes, that is an absolutely true story. I don't know if you ever knew that. I don't know if I ever told you that I was on the Golden Girls.
You mentioned in passing, we never got into it.
Yeah, my very first job in Hollywood, I thought, this is it, baby, I'm on my way. Because it's true, it not only was my favorite it was my favorite TV show, so not only was it really popular, but the fact that I was actually on my favorite TV show. I mean, I used to watch, I used to VCR it in college. My first week in Hollywood, I snuck on the set. A friend and I snuck on the set, and we were discovered, and we just said that we got lost, and they put us in the VIP seats.
Wow.
So I can still hear my laughing on the soundtrack of that episode. And then about a year later, I had the honor, privilege of being on the show. It was a remarkable, remarkable experience, which all goes about saying, what are we talking about today, Brad?
We are talking about Golden Girls.
The Golden Girls, the happy birthday Golden Girls, 40th birthday, September 14th, 1985. The show premiered on NBC. And, it's funny, I was thinking, in the pilot, which we're going to talk about, Dorothy says, "I would kill to be 40 again." And, well, you are, Dorothy. You all are 40 again. So I'm excited to talk about this, Brad. Thank you for allowing me to indulge myself in that little story and to talk about this show I love.
Well, that's okay. And, before we begin, I got to backtrack a little. I've got to say an apology to Matt Baum, our friend Matt Baum.
Yeah.
Because when I interviewed him for my former podcast, I told him I did not like the Golden Girls. Or I told him it was a terrible TV show. I don't know what it was, the words out of my mouth. And the look he gave me, I wasn't able to explain myself because I was tongue-tied. So the real truth is that is not true, but I couldn't elaborate on what I was saying. And today I will explain why I said that.
Well, I hope so. Otherwise, this is going to be an incredibly short podcast because I don't have that same issue. I love this show. I think so much of America loves this show. You know, what's really kind of funny about this show is I find very humorous about the show, or not maybe humorous, but one of the tests of its classic status is the fact that I think it is more popular today, or has been more popular in the last 20 years than it was when it aired. I mean, it is a touchstone for so many young people, I think from the time it went off the air up until today. Have you noticed that?
I don't know if it's as popular. I know it has stayed tremendously popular. So I can't argue that. It blows my mind how many people know this show, young people today. Older folks just keep watching over and over and over again.
I mean, it's not like people are, streaming Who's the Boss. Maybe some people are. I'm sorry if you're a Who's the Boss fan. I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? This show is still, the fact that this show is 40 years old and is still so popular, I think, speaks to so many things in its timelessness. The wonderful writing, the phenomenal acting, the comic skills of these 4 genius comic actresses. I mean, it's just... I put them on to watch them again. They always I used to run them in the background of all the time when I was, whenever I was doing anything in the house. And then I stopped watching for a while, and just watching these again, I was just so happy. They make me so happy. And I'm very happy to be talking about this show. We were talking about how big it is now, but it was a huge, huge hit when it started, when it began out of the gate. Do you remember when we talked about Alice and we said, that most TV shows take a while to find their footing?
Mm-hmm.
Not true of the Golden Girls. The Golden Girls...
I know, exploded
out of the gate, the Golden Girls. Its first season, comedy, Emmy for Best Comedy Series, Betty White, Best Comic Actress, Emmy, and the popularity of it. And the first season is phenomenal. So over its run, it was nominated for 68 Emmys. It won 11, including 2 for Best Comedy. And here's something wonderful. Each actress won an Emmy. Now, that's very rare. It's only happened on 4 other sitcoms. All in the Family, Will and Grace, Schitt's Creek, 3 other sitcoms, where the entire main cast all won an Emmy. So nobody could be jealous because they all got the gold. The Golden Girls got the gold.
I didn't know the 4 of them on All in the Family got Emmys.
Yeah, they all won an Emmys. They all won Emmys. It dominated Saturday night. I remember that. Do you remember... when it aired on Saturday nights? Did you watch it?
No, I don't. I don't know if I watched this originally or if I watched it only in reruns. I know that sounds strange, but I really can't remember. There was a period when I did not have a television, and it was by choice. I moved out of my parents' home, and I didn't care. I was an avid reader, and I had stopped watching television, and so I don't really know when I watched this show originally.
You were watching St. Elsewhere when this was on.
Well, that is true. I don't know. Something was going on. I really can't explain it. Obviously, my younger days are a mess, and I have no idea what happened. And there are many reasons why. Go figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I never met. As I said, I VCR'd these things nightly. I used to bring my little black and white TV to me with the theater if I was doing a play. And during the intermission, I would watch 15 minutes of Golden Girls. Not exactly a method actor trick, I'll tell you right now, but I didn't care. So this show ranked in the top 10 for 6 out of its 7 seasons. The final season it didn't, which I don't understand because the final season is probably my very favorite. But at its height, the Golden Girls reached a 30-plus share, which means that 30% of all TVs were tuned into the Golden Girls. Now, when you consider today that a, air quotes, hit show gets less than a 20% share, for example, The final episode of The Big Bang Theory got a 22% share. All right.
That's huge.
In 2019.
For today.
People say, oh, that's huge. Golden Girls was getting 30 plus every week. And now it was a different time. Not all these streaming. There was cable, but not all this streaming stuff. But still, that is when you're thinking it's a show about 4 over 50 women, really over 60 women, except for one. That's pretty astounding achievement. Pretty astounding achievement, especially since, the idea of putting a show about, air quotes, elderly women on TV was not burning up the airwaves at the time it was proposed.
No, it's amazing it ever made it to the air. I think if it was anyone other than Susan Harris, it may not have happened.
Yeah, I know, right? Do you know a little bit about how the show came about?
I do know it came from a skit that was done.
Right.
I'm not sure where the skit was. I thought it was on the Emmys, but I'm almost certain that is not correct.
No, it was a TV special on NBC, and it was introducing the network's new season schedule.
Okay, it was Doris Roberts, and who else? Who was the other one?
Selma Diamond. Selma Diamond.
Boy, too wonderful. Okay.
They were both at NBC at the time. Selma Diamond was on Night Court, and Doris Roberts was doing Remington Steele. And they appeared in this skit, and the name of the skit, to promote Miami Vice. And the name of the skit was, do you know what the name of the skit was?
Miami Nice. That I did know.
Exactly. And NBC, so they played elderly women living in Miami. And the NBC president at the time, Warren Littlefield, liked the concept, and he met with producers Paul Junger-Witt and Tony Thomas, who happened to be pitching another show to him at the time, and he asked them to develop this idea. And Witt asked his wife, the aforementioned Susan Harris of soap fame, to work on it. And that's how it began. And it really appealed to her because, as I said, there had never been anything on TV that addressed this demo. Although NBC was asking for shows of women over 40, not 60, but still, it was something. It was something.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think we'll get into it. I think one of the reasons why it succeeded was it wasn't old women as they've always been portrayed in television and movies.
Exactly. So do we want to give a little rundown about who exactly the names of these 4 women and these 4 actresses who played these women? And then we can give a little bit of background about how they got the jobs?
Sure. I can run down and you can tell me how they got the jobs.
That sounds good.
Let's see. The first one we have is the wonderful, extremely talented Bea Arthur, and she played Dorothy Zbornak. And Dorothy was she was the most grounded individual. I think the show wouldn't have not done well. I don't think she gets enough credit because if it was just Blanche or Rose, it would have been too much. And Dorothy kept things grounded, and she was us to a large degree, as you frequently say.
She was.
Yeah.
Yes, Arthur considered Dorothy the great balloon pricker. That's what she called her. Someone who called out the hypocrisy, the idiocy, the ridiculousness, the over-the-topness of her 2 roommates. And you're absolutely right. The show would not have worked without that grounding force. And by the way, it didn't when she left and they tried to do it without her in Golden Palace, which we'll cover in our next episode. We should probably say we're doing a 2-parter.
Yes.
Brad, this is part 1. This is part 1 of our Golden Girls, and we'll handle part 2, but we'll get to that. So Dorothy Petrillo Zbornak Hollingsworth, full name. Now, in the pilot, or the first season, Dorothy's 55, and Bea Arthur was actually 63. Just like to throw that out there.
Yeah, a lot of people think they were all in their 50s because they gave younger ages.
Yeah.
But that is not true.
No, they were all in
as
their
you said,
60s.
Rue McClanahan was the only one. But let's go to the next one. Rose Nyland was played by Betty White, who is my favorite. She could be blamed for being a little over the top, but I think because it was Betty White, she pulled it off.
Yeah.
Her stories were ridiculous. Her background at St. Olaf were just absurd. And it was like Lake Wobegon to a large degree. But because they came out of her mouth, you didn't go roll your eyes. You just laughed.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
loved her.
Yeah, so Rose's age was also 55, and Betty was also 63. So Betty and Bea were the same age. And yes, Rose is not this is the key to the character. Rose was not dumb. She is profoundly naive.
Yes.
And Betty said that Jay Sandrich, who directed the pilot, or a friend of the pod from our MTM episodes, gave her the key to the character when he said that Rose takes every word at face value. She didn't understand double meanings or sarcasm. So as Betty White famously said, if you said to Rose, I could eat a horse, she'd call the ASPCA.
Yes.
That's the key to the character of Rose.
She's Amelia Bedelia.
She was Amelia Bedelia.
She was Amelia Bedelia. Next, we have Bea Arthur's former castmate, Rue McClanahan, as Blanche Devereaux. And I guess you could say she branched out all over the town. She was the man-crazy Southern belle who was unapologetic about her love for sex. They had a lot of laughs at her expense, and she just kind of shrugged them off.
Yes.
And she's great because just like the others, she showed that older women can enjoy sex.
Oh, and then some. Yes.
Yeah.
Blanche Elizabeth Devereaux, whose initials spell what, Brad?
Bed.
Bed. Yeah.
We talked about it, and I had to run it through my head again.
I love how that comes up in one of the later episodes. Your initials spell bed? And they all just look at each other like, how do we not know this? Yes. Blanche Elizabeth Hollingsworth Devereaux. So Blanche is 51 in the show. Rue McClanahan was also 51. So she's the only one who's actually playing her age in this show.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that. I don't recall her age. I know the others kind of fluttered around here and there, different ages, but in the at least the first few episodes, it was pretty steady, and then they kind of changed as needed.
Yes. Well, the key to that is that, and it's not an episode we're going to talk about, which breaks my heart because I love it, because it has one of my favorite Dorothy Savage put-downs. When Blanche is dating the younger man, and he says to her, "You remind me of my mother," and she's crestfallen. She comes in and she says, "For the first time in my life, I feel over 40. And Dorothy says, "You know why that is, honey? Because you're over 50. So yeah, 51. And finally, who do we have?
Finally, we have Estelle Getty as Sophia Petrillo, who was actually only supposed to be a very minor character, and much for poor Coco. The show loved her and gave her a bigger role, and we never saw Coco after the first episode, which we'll get into.
Alas, poor Coco. Alas, poor Coco.
She was Dorothy's mother, which is funny because she was younger than Bea Arthur.
Yeah.
And she did, her look, she did a great job. She was just funny.
She was funny. She was brilliant. Estelle Getty, brilliant. Yes. Sophia Petrillo, Weinstock, because if you remember, in season 3, she got married to character actor Jack Gilford, and then she never heard of him again. He just disappeared.
I was wondering this as I was looking through episodes, and I remembered that she got married, but I also knew he never became a part of the show, and I'm like, was it the typical drunk and they got annulled? I never knew what happened, so you're telling me it just never was mentioned again.
He just disappeared. There may be, I think there's a flashback episode in one of the seasons where they have flashbacks to previous seasons, and she mentions him, and she mentions that they got married, and I think she might have mentioned they got annulled. I don't know. I have to look at the episode. I don't remember that off the top of my head. I don't think so, though. I think they just stayed married. My grandmother got married later in life, and she just never got a divorce. He didn't die. They just stopped living together, and because they were Catholic, they're not going to get a divorce, so just stayed married. So I think that's what happened with Sophia. I think that's what happened with her.
He went out for cigarettes, and they forgot all about him.
Went out to get ice cream, like Anita Gillette and St. Elsewhere. Yes. Sophia's 80, which she makes a point of very frequently in the first season, and Estelle Getty was indeed only 62. So she was indeed 1 year younger than her TV daughter, Bea Arthur, Dorothy. So I think that's amazing. So that's your cast. That's your main the four Beatles right here. We got them: Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia. Now we talked a little bit about how the casting went about. We've talked about it a little bit. I want to go into it. Then I want to have a special person tell us. So should I go ahead and talk about just briefly the casting, the initial casting of these characters and how it came about, just to remind people?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, when this show was being developed, I think they called in or considered every single actress of a certain age in Hollywood. But there were ones that were really obvious to them because they were stars. Betty White was a no-brainer. Betty White had also just done a TV show on NBC, Mama's Family, with Rue McClanahan, playing totally different parts. So they brought them in to read. The first person, actually, though, interestingly, to be cast was Estelle Getty. Did you know that, Brad?
Yeah, she wanted one of the other roles, and I can't remember who she read for.
No.
Didn't she?
No. She came in for Sophia. No, Estelle Getty.
Oh, I thought it was somebody else.
No, Estelle Getty had done a tour of Torch Song Trilogy. And that show brought her to fame and to the notice of the casting director, Judith Weiner. And she brought her in to read Sophia. And everybody who witnessed this woman's reading said, there was no question. This woman blew them all away. Who is this woman? She comes out of nowhere. She had a very slim resume. She had done a lot of stage. Torch Song Trilogy was the biggest thing she ever did. She appears in Tootsie for a minute. If you blink, you miss her very quickly. And so they were just blown away by her. So she was cast, the very first person to be cast, which I thought was really interesting. And it took 3 hours for them to make her up into Sophia. Now, being on the set and seeing what she really looked like as Estelle Getty, and then how she transformed into Sophia, I can see that. It would take 3 hours because she looked nothing like Sophia Petrillo. I think we all know that. And the thing about Estelle Getty was that she also had a very difficult time with Sophia's Italian-American names and expressions. She would always ask the writers, why can't we make her Jewish? She felt much better with Jewish phrases. And you can kind of see that sometimes. But still, she was brilliant. And Rue McClanahan said she suffered from very, very severe stage fright. And so it got worse and worse, oddly, as the years went on and she became a bigger and bigger star. And it's funny because, at the end of her life, she suffered from dementia, and a lot of people suspected that maybe this was the onset of the dementia, but apparently it happened during the entire run of the series. She had a lot of problems because she would get so nervous going in front of this live audience with these 3 major, major comic stars. So who knows? Up for speculation, but the proof of the pudding is that when the cameras were rolling, she nailed it. She nailed it.
Well, and as I understand, she had more of a struggle on Golden Palace, which, she was 8 years older at
probably,
that point.
Yes.
So
yeah, and I think the dementia probably was playing into that then. So, as I said before, Betty White and Rue McClanahan were both appearing on Mama's Family on NBC, which was canceled. And to Rue McClanahan's great relief, but although Rue McClanahan actually left the show earlier, her character of Aunt Fran was written out as having choked on a toothpick, which I think is probably one of the most ignominious deaths in the history of television. So the problem with TV executives is they don't have a lot of imagination. We know this. And so they viewed Betty White, and Rue McClanahan based on their previous characters, i.e. they looked at Betty White as Sue Ann Nivens, and they looked at Rue McClanahan as Vivian from Maude, who was also very kind of naive and sweet, or Aunt Fran. So, and as we said during our Mary Tyler Moore episode, the women were originally brought in to read. White was going to read for Blanche. Betty White was going to read for Blanche. And Rue McClanahan was going to read for Rose. And even at that point, Rue McClanahan knew she's something about Blanche spoke to her. She just didn't think she was right for Rose. And it was director Jay Sandrich, who was directing the pilot, who said, why don't you two switch roles? And that's how that happened.
And as always, it's hard to imagine either of them not playing the roles that they did.
Exactly. Now, Susan Harris, who created the show and who worked on the pilot, had worked with Bea Arthur on Maude. She'd written an episode of Maude, the abortion episode.
Oh, wow.
And she created the role of Dorothy as, air quotes, a Bea Arthur type. However, there was a problem. The NBC executives did not want Bea Arthur. Mostly Brandon Tartikoff, because despite her fame as Maude and winning Emmys for it, He was hesitant to cast her because she had a very low Q score with audiences. You know what a Q score is, Brad?
I don't know what a Q score is, but I do find it interesting that Maude was on for a long time because people did not like Maude as a character.
Yeah, well, she was abrasive. She was the L word. She was liberal. God bless her. And she was very outspoken. She was the liberal Archie Bunker.
Yes.
So they were very hesitant. So they wanted to read other actors. And there were some executives who had one specific actor in mind. And do you know this story, Brad? And if you do, let me know.
I don't.
The one they had in mind and the one they brought in to read was none other than Broadway legend Elaine Stritch. Now, you know who Elaine Stritch is.
Yeah, but I had no idea that was the case.
Elaine actually, this is what's really weird, is funny, is that Elaine told this story in her one-woman show at Liberty about reading for Golden Girls. And it's just, the story is very funny. Basically, according to Rue McClanahan, Elaine Stritch sabotaged her reading because she was nervous. And she said at the reading, when she was brought in the reading with these producers and with Susan Harris, she said, "You'll have to forgive me. When I get nervous, I tend to play with the dialogue a little bit." And Susan Harris said, "Hopefully just the punctuation." So, okay, you're not getting off to a real good start there, Elaine. So apparently there was a line, and this is according to Elaine Stritch, past the hors d'oeuvres. And Elaine's take was, past the fucking hors d'oeuvres.
Oh.
And yeah, so you don't do that. You don't do that. So she immediately alienated the producers. But according to Joel Thurm, one of the casting directors, in 2025, he said that they actually did not treat Stritch well because Harris had it in her head that she wanted Bea Arthur. There was just no way around it. So who knows what really happened? It was probably a combination of both, but it didn't happen with Elaine Stritch. So Susan Harris turned to Rue McClanahan. And this is where I want to bring our special guest in because she tells this story much better than I do. This is Rue McClanahan talking about convincing Bea Arthur to come and do the pilot of The Golden Girls.
He heard us read. They heard us read. And the next thing I know, I'm getting called by Susan Harris saying, "Is there anything you can do to get Bea Arthur to do this show?" Because we'd worked together on Maude. And I said, "Oh, I've been wanting to work with her again. I'll give her a call." I called Bea. And I said, "What is the matter with you? This is the best script you're ever going to read." And she said, "Rue." "I'm not interested in doing Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Niven." I said, "No, it's the other way around. I'm playing the vamp. Betty's playing the nitwit." She said, "Oh, no, that's very interesting." The next thing I know, the three of us have been called in to read for network. And we wowed them.
Wouldn't you rather hear Rue tell it than me?
Yes. Anytime.
Anytime. Okay. So we have our four main people in place, Brad.
And that really surprised me. I would have, if you'd asked me, I would have sworn, not because I've read anything, it just felt this way, that Bea Arthur would have been the first one cast, and I would have actually guessed that she was actively involved in creating the show and getting it set. I don't know why I would think that.
She was the last one cast.
I know.
I believe she signed her contract on a Friday, and she was at the read-through the following Monday. That's how fast it was. But the point of this is that everybody thought this was the most brilliant pilot script that had come down the pike since the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Everybody. Rue McClanahan said just looking at the pages, she knew it was going to be a hit. They all loved this pilot script, and it is. It's a brilliant script. And we're going to talk about the pilot. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. So should we talk about how we're going to structure this episode, Brad?
Yes. On this episode, we're going to talk about the pilot and then 2 episodes that we picked. And then the part 2 next week will be the other 2 episodes that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, there's just so much to talk about on this show.
Yes.
It would be a very, very long podcast episode, especially my personal feelings about it, how I feel about this show. So yeah, we'll talk about the pilot, and we will go ahead into 2 episodes on this particular episode of Going Hollywood. And then there's a natural break because, Brad, as you have said many times to me, you don't believe TV shows should run past 5 seasons. And The Golden Girls is a perfect example because by the end of season 4, there was getting a lot of stirrings and a lot of rumors about this show is winding down. This thing is not fresh anymore. We need to. So Susan Harris basically brought in a whole new team for seasons 5 through 7. And that's what we're going to cover in our next episode. But for this one, it's The Pilot is our very first episode, also known as The Engagement. It was videotaped on April 17th, 1985, aired on September 14th, 1985, written by Susan Harris and directed by Jay Sandrich.
Oh, it is wonderful dating in Miami. All the single men under 80 are cocaine smugglers.
You know, I'd kill to be 20 again.
Oh, I would kill to be 40 again. Oh, you know, I had the shock of my life today. I was in the teacher's lounge talking to a group of girls in their 20s. Oh, they were so pretty. At that age, you don't even have to be pretty, and you're pretty. Anyway, we were laughing and giggling and having a great time, and I completely forgot that I was older. You know, I just felt like one of the girls, and we had a wonderful time. And then I got into my car and caught a glimpse of myself, and I almost had a heart attack. This old woman was in the mirror. I didn't even recognize her.
Who was it?
So, Brad, do you want to give a brief rundown of what happens in the pilot?
Yes. And you know, what's funny is of the episodes that we did, this is the one I remember the least. And it's, kind of the characters are all there, and it's kind of hinted at that they haven't been together that long. It's made clear that it is Blanche's house and the other 2 are renting. Sophia shows up because Shady Pines burnt down, which is rather funny because later they always trying to put her in Shady Pines. But maybe they rebuilt it. I don't know. But in the process...
it was rebuilt. It was rebuilt.
Oh, it was. Okay. So in the process of the whole episode, the anchor to the show was that Blanche had been dating a guy for... I was trying to pick up, was it only a week?
It had not been long. I think it was longer than a week, but it was not very
okay, because I kept thinking they were saying a week.
No.
Anyway, he had proposed to her, and she was debating whether or not to accept his proposal.
Yeah.
And that would have caused a big stir in the house, such as what were going to happen to her roommates, and should she marry this guy after such a brief period? The interesting thing is, and I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit, this was the most insecure I've ever seen Blanche. She was afraid that she would never get another man. She would never get another opportunity.
It's interesting. Yeah, the characters pretty much are, this is what's amazing, as we said, out of the gate, the show was going. The characters, there were tweaks later, but the characters were pretty much set.
Yes.
But what I find really interesting about the pilot, and particularly about Blanche, is Blanche's Southern accent is a hell of a lot lighter than it is in future episodes. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
Well, there's a reason why.
What's that?
I'm surprised you didn't notice it because Rue McClanahan, once she realized she was actually going to play Blanche, she knew exactly who she wanted to base Blanche on, her Aunt Ina, who was this over-the-top, flamboyant woman from Oklahoma. Rue McClanahan is from Oklahoma. But she didn't like being from Oklahoma, so she created this flamboyant, over-the-top Southern dialect, which is what Rue McClanahan came to the pilot doing. And Jay Sandrich said, no Southern dialect. And Rue McClanahan was like, what? But her name is Blanche Devereaux. She's more Southern than Blanche Dubois. No Southern dialect? He's like, no Southern dialect, just talk the way you normally do. So in this episode, Rue McClanahan is basically talking like Rue McClanahan. That's her natural kind of slight Oklahoma accent. But when the show was picked up, and Jay Sandrich only directed the pilot. He was only contracted to do the pilot because he was directing The Cosby Show. Mm-hmm. And Paul Bogart came in to direct the series, and they were rehearsing the first episode of the series. He said to Rue, where's your Southern accent? Blanche is a Southern Belle. She's like, oh, thank God I can do my accent. So that's why she doesn't have an accent as heavy and deep in the pilot as she does in the rest of the series, which is, it's interesting.
I can't believe I didn't catch that.
You will. Watch it again and you'll definitely catch it. So there's a lot of things to talk about in the pilot, but I think before we go any further, we have to talk about the Coco in the room. God bless. R.I.P. Coco, the cook. Poor Coco.
I watched that pilot and I thought, I'm glad they got rid of him. At least on the pilot, he served no function.
Well, as Brad said earlier, too, Sophia was not intended to be a regular character. She was going to be a reoccurring character. But Estelle Getty, during rehearsal, okay, let's go back to Coco because I want to talk about. So Coco, the character of Coco, in case anybody hasn't seen this, I don't know why you're listening to this, but Coco is their cook, their housekeeper. The girls have a cook and a housekeeper. The character was named after Susan Harris's dog. And it's played by actor Charles Levin, who had played a really kind of groundbreaking gay character on Hill Street Blues. It's basically the same character that he played on Hill Street Blues. And Levin said that during the rehearsals, Estelle Getty was being very small and quiet and not really punching anything. And, you know what I mean? She was not very confident. And then she walked on the stage, like the true actress that she was, and boom, she blew the roof off of the soundstage. People went crazy for Sophia. And that's when Coco, unfortunately, saw the writing on the wall because they realized, first of all, that's too many characters. We can't have storylines for 5 characters. Too much for a half-hour show. Who slips out of here? And unfortunately, it was Coco. So Charles Levin will go down in history as appearing on the pilot of Golden Girls and then disappearing into the abyss. Bye-bye, Coco.
So sad, except I'm not really sad. I'm kind of glad it happened because...
Well, yeah, there's no need for it. Plus, the producers also said, we don't want to have someone working for these girls. We want to see these girls in the kitchen cooking. And that's what Sophia ended up doing. That was Sophia's, Sophia was usually the cook, and that's how they all would converse in the kitchen. And to have somebody cooking for them and serving them, it doesn't really, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
But I think Coco probably made a hell of a cheesecake.
Oh, I bet he did. So in this, what I find interesting about this episode is Bea Arthur is basically playing Maude. You know what I mean? She's
a softened Maude.
She's slightly softened Maude. Dorothy is still kind of savage. As the show progressed, the character of Dorothy changed. Bea Arthur made her a lot more neurotic and insecure, especially, and as her relationship with Sophia deepened and it became such a wonderful treasure trove of comic put-downs and interactions, that character really kind of grew and expanded. So by the end of the series, Dorothy is just as neurotic as the rest of them, but not in this pilot. In this pilot, she's basically playing Maude, I think. And Betty White has Rose down from the beginning. She's perfect.
Yeah.
There's no change. It's incredible to me. That woman was so talented, incredible.
I would say that I noticed that she was a little less naive, it appeared to me, but not, only because I'm sitting there watching it, like for this show. I'm sitting here analyzing it, but I don't think anybody would really notice. She was awesome.
She was. But the real standout of this episode, it was indeed Estelle Getty as Sophia. In fact, she has one line. There were a couple issues I had with the pilot, and there's a very funny scene where Blanche's fiance comes in and he charms them, air quotes, and then he leaves, and then Sophia deadpans, "The man is a scuzzball." Yeah. And the studio audience goes crazy. Well, that's because, as it was originally taped, Sophia's line was, "The man is a douchebag." And it got this huge reaction from the studio audience. And then Standards and Practices came down and said, you're not going to say douchebag on network television. So they had to go back and re-record it to where she said, "The man is a scuzzball." But the audience's reaction is from the douchebag comment. Because they go, really, you're like, oh, that's a funny line. But that audience reaction is not, it's not all that, it's a little out of proportion. Anyway, I also think what's interesting about this pilot is that they have to justify Sophia's outspokenness by saying that the stroke destroyed the part of her brain that censors what she says.
Yes.
That is just such a lame thing. They left it. That was the only time they talked about that. She talked about her stroke, of course, later on, but never about her being brain damaged to that extent, because that just seems silly. Why couldn't you just be outspoken? Why not?
That was the first I noticed it. I'm sure I did when I watched it in the past, but I'm like, have they brought that up before? And I really was pondering it, so I'm glad you cleared it up. It was bad.
Yeah, it's like they had to give her a medical condition for being outspoken, which, is silly. Just let her be outspoken. And that's what they did for the rest of the issue. She was just outspoken. Yes, she mentioned her stroke from time to time, but she was just outspoken. So I really love this episode. I feel like, it really is a great script. It has some great, great jokes in it. And it gives you the background of the characters and their relationship in a nutshell in 30 minutes. What do you think?
I agree. And the beautiful thing about this is it doesn't feel like a pilot.
No.
At all.
No, it doesn't.
If you stuck this in the middle of the series, you would not realize that this was the first episode.
Well, except that when they walk out the way to the lanai and they're in Blanche's bedroom. Or some things changed on the logistics of the set. That's true. Yes.
Well, Blanche's bedroom seemed to float around, I think, because sometimes it was to the left.
Well, it was usually at the end of the hallway by the end of the series, but for this pilot, it's where the lanai is, and then you enter the lanai a different way. But I'm being incredibly nitpicking.
Yes.
I think it is a brilliant, brilliant pilot. All shows change, all shows grow, but this show had it pretty damn well established from the very first episode. And you can see why NBC was like, oh my God, yes, buy that.
Yeah.
And make the old lady a central character. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So do we want to say anything more about the pilot episode, Brad?
No, I think we pretty much nailed it. I mean, it just was really well done. It was a good pilot. It was one of the better pilots that exist.
So as we said, we are going to talk about an episode each. This was, I don't know about you, Brad, maybe because I have a different history with the show, but I feel like this was even harder than Bewitched, trying to pick episodes from this series, because there's so many great episodes to talk about, particularly the first year. And what I found was that it was not necessarily the entire episode, but it was moments in the episode. It was an epic put down of Dorothy's, like, when the one I was talking about, where Blanche and the younger man, when Blanche is dating this younger man, and she says to Dorothy, Dirk's a few years younger than I am, and Dorothy says, in what, Blanche? Dog years? I mean, it is like these epic put downs, things like that. The wonderful episode where they all meet, where they say how they all meet at the end of the season, it's how they all come together to live in the house. They're wonderful, but we had to make choices. So Brad is going to be up with his first choice, and we're going to go by air dates, not filming dates, because your episode, Brad, was actually filmed before mine, or videotaped before mine, but mine aired. No, I'm sorry, the reverse. Your episode was actually videotaped after mine, but it aired before mine. So why don't you go with your episode first?
Well, and I want to speak to something that I alluded to earlier when I talked about Matt Baum, and I'm going to bring it up now because you talked about how it was so hard to pick an episode.
Yeah.
And it was. Here's the thing that was going through my head. I watch YouTube clips of this show, and Maurice has always sent me reels from this show, and I laugh hysterically. When I watch the series, I don't.
Really?
And the reason is sitcoms from the 70s and 80s just aren't holding. I couldn't figure it out why. And I was thinking about the Alice episode we talked about. Sitcoms just haven't held up for me.
Mm-hmm. No.
We've come such a long way in writing and continuity that I actually really struggled. And then, there were a few that came to mind. And that's why I struggled. So
yes,
this show is hilarious, but unfortunately, it is still an 80s sitcom, and it feels very much like an 80s sitcom.
Well, it's a very standard structure sitcom. It's videotaped in front of a studio audience, 3 cameras. Plot is linear. What I love about some of the later episodes that we'll talk about in our next episode is they're not always linear. They got a little more adventurous with the timing of some of the episodes and some of the things they did, which I love. But yeah, you're right. It's very standard. It's like Lucy. It's like Mary Tyler Moore. It's like All in the Family. There's a plot, a through line. That's the way TV was. And we have come differently. We're much different now with multi-layered storytelling and one cameras and people breaking the fourth wall. So yeah, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but still.
I'm looking at it from a 2025 glasses,
right?
Because I used to love this show, and I'm not saying that I don't, but Maurice and I binge watched it either last year or the year before, and we were laughing. And then about halfway through the series, we're like, these women never learned a damn thing. One episode is like Blanche and her gay brother is a really good example. They have this growth at the end of this episode. And then the next episode, it's like it never happened. Each one is like a little capsule of its own. And they don't do that anymore, thank God.
I agree with you in the early parts of this series. And one of the reasons why I wanted to split this episode of Going Hollywood in two is because I don't think that happens in the second part, in the later seasons. I do think lessons are learned. I do think there's some really touching moments in the later ones where people are actually showing they've grown, they've learned. But anyway, that's for next time. So Brad, what's up first? What's your first one?
After I have now dragged Golden Girls through the mud, I'm going to bring up a show an episode that I really loved. And it's season 2, episode 4, It's a Miserable Life, which is a great take on It's a Wonderful Life. It aired November 1st, 1986, written by Barry Fanaro and Mort Nathan, and was directed by Terry Hughes.
Here's my card. How may I be of service to you?
Well, Mr. Pfeiffer...
That's Pfeiffer. The P is not silent.
Mr. Pfeiffer, we're interested in arranging a funeral.
Isn't that lovely? The three of you planning ahead for Mother.
Hey, Pfeiffer, how would you like a punch in your face?
The funeral is for a neighbor.
Oh, well, my condolences.
Oh, no, there's no need. We didn't like her.
In fact, the whole neighborhood despised her.
Oh, I see. Well, how did she pass on?
She killed him.
Rough neighborhood.
And can I tell you how excited I was when I found out you picked this one? Because it's Frida Claxton. It's one of my favorite episodes. Frida Claxton. Yes. Why don't you tell the people who don't know who Frida Claxton is what this episode's about?
Okay, well, Frida Claxton is a neighbor to the ladies, and the girls are trying to save a tree. But Frida opposes it. Frida is a nasty woman. In fact, Dorothy says that the Halloween before this, half the children in the neighborhood were dressed up like Frida Claxton. And there is no redeeming quality to this woman whatsoever. And none. And they go to court, or in front of the city council, I guess, basically, to try and get this tree not chopped down. And Frida is on.
They petitioned.
Yeah, they
petitioned to save the tree. Yeah.
Yeah, they had 60 names on the petition not to cut the tree down. Frida wants it cut down. She hates trees. She hates people. The trees in her yard. And Rose is so mad. She goes over to her face and tells her she should drop dead. And lo and behold, right then and there, Rose killed her.
If you don't like what we have to say, sit there and shut up. And if you can't, Mrs. Claxton will just drop dead. And she does.
Thud. And that was quite a fall she took.
That was a fall. You know, it's so funny. Like I said, I love this episode. I'm so glad you picked it. This was like a lost episode for me because I remember seeing it when it aired and I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I saw it again and I loved it. The thing I love about this, you know, the actress who plays Frida Claxton, her name is Nan Martin. Her name was Nan Martin. Do you know she was only 59 years old when she played Frida Claxton?
No, I would have guessed much older. She always played this type of character, didn't she?
She appeared again, actually. She was on Golden Girls again a couple seasons later in the 4th season, and she played Filomena Bosco, who was an old Sicilian friend of Sophia's, who may or may not be Dorothy's biological mother. So she appeared again, a completely different character, but again, she was aged up. But yeah, I love this episode. Frida, she is such an evil bitch. She is just so funny. And Rose can't understand. Everybody loves Rose. Rose can't understand why anyone would hate a living thing, and she says, I hate you, and that's what sets Rose off. It says, you just drop dead. And then she does, and of course, Rose goes through all this guilt about she killed Mrs. Claxton. And of course, it ends with the girls. What happens with after Mrs. Claxton dies?
Well, Rose goes on about everybody deserves to be treated like human. Those weren't her words, but that's basically what she was saying. And so they all agree to chip in and have a funeral for Ms. Claxton.
Yeah.
And they're the only ones that show up for the funeral.
Yes.
And to me, the funniest moment of the show was when this other woman happens to show up, says that Frida was her best friend, but she doesn't say Frida was her best friend. She just says, she was my best friend. And she gets up there and does this little eulogy. And then they point out to her that she's talking about the wrong person. And when the woman realized that it was Frida Claxton, she kicks the casket.
It's the best. It's the best. I love it whenever the girls go to a funeral. It happens a lot because, it's the Golden Girls and people are dying. But I love it when they go to a funeral. Did you ever see the one where Rose has to give the eulogy at her aunt's funeral and the girls and Dorothy and Blanche are talking about what they would say about each other if they ever had to give a eulogy about the other one? And Dorothy's saying all these wonderful things about Blanche. And Dorothy goes, well, what would you say about me, Blanche? And Blanche, first thing she says is, well, I would say I always felt safe having you in the house. This is what I love about there's these little gems in almost every episode. The little gem in this episode for me, and why I love it so much, is the funeral director. What is the funeral director's name that they go to visit to buy the casket for Frida Claxton?
Mr. Pfeiffer.
It's not Pfeiffer, like Michelle Pfeiffer. The P is not silent. It's Pfeiffer. And, here's a little story. So Bea Arthur was notoriously difficult to break up. She was always very dry humor, very serious. When I did my episode, very, very nice person, but very dry, very serious, not crazy. She's Bea Arthur. You kind of get that from her. But occasionally something would hit her funny bone, and she had difficulty stopping laughing. And the Pfeiffer was one of those things. She could not stop laughing every time she said Pfeiffer, because it became Pfeiffer and funeral and all these PF sounds. And it just struck her. It struck her as very funny. I think that's a great story because it is a very funny bit. The P is not silent.
It is, and it's so random. It's just...
It is. Well, Mr. Pfeiffer.
You could have had that episode without it, but it just was like the cherry on the top.
It was. Mr. Pfeiffer, we are bereaved on a budget. Did you know this episode is also based on a real event?
No.
Yeah, this episode really happened on the TV show Benson. There was an actor who played a very mean character on Benson, and in the TV episode, the episode of Benson, the character dies, like Frida Claxton. Mm-hmm. However, the actor who was playing the character really did die during rehearsal. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the very scary, sad inspiration for this very, very funny episode of The Golden Girls.
Wow.
All right, so my episode's up next first, but before I go to my episode, Brad, we've been wanting to talk about our reviews that we got. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time. For those of you who wrote reviews and rated us, thank you so much. That means so much to us. Right, Brad?
Yes, it does. And I'm not going to go all the way back to the original reviews. These are only the most recent, and because we've been really asking folks to please leave a review and rate us as well. And we've gotten some that came in, and we just want to give a shout out to these individuals to say thank you very much. First one was from Senior Sway. I love that name.
Yeah, it's a great name.
And
thank you, Senior Sway.
And I won't bore people with the whole reviews, but he said these two are lovers of all things cinema, pure entertainment. And we agree, of course. And then the next one was from Keistman. And he found us from the Poseidon Adventure episode. And I'm going to read this because this I think was funny. He says, I was worried that the hosts, Tony and Brad, were going to tear apart and make fun of my favorite movie. Much to my surprise, they treated it with so much reverence, respect, and knowledge and fun that I couldn't wait to listen to other episodes.
Oh,
so we got this guy.
That's nice. That's so nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And then we have an Australian friend, Carl.
Ooh, love that.
And yes, and he points out that there is variance in this show, that we've done everything from 2 Mel Brooks movies to Rosemary's Baby. we do swing the pendulum.
We do.
And then we have Nicole Maddox, and she just wanted to pop in and say, I love this podcast. Keep up the great storytelling, gentlemen, and we will. And then Dan in Zurich.
Ooh.
And he, the last sentence, I believe, was, I recommend this podcast to all movie lovers. So thank you to all of you for leaving the reviews. I will say we've had some nice ratings in Canada, as well as some ratings in Germany as well. Now, I got to say my apologies to the rest of the world. If you have rated us and reviewed us, there is a problem. Apple only lets us, we have to pull up each individual country to find out if there are ratings and reviews. It doesn't even tell us if there is one. There could be a review from Zimbabwe, and we have no idea unless I happen to search and pull up Zimbabwe. So if I've missed you, I apologize. I only went through the countries that we get the most views from. Or I only pick the countries that we get the most listens from. If you're watching us,
we know what you're saying.
Yes,
we get what you're saying. We get what you're saying. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you, everybody. We so appreciate that. You know, as I've said before, you know, Brad and I have other jobs on our lives, so this is really a labor of love for us, and that you took the time to rate and review us and leave those very nice things. Thank you so much. We so appreciate it. Now let's get back to the storytelling aspect of the show, because we're going to go on to my next episode of The Golden Girls. And as I said, that was so difficult to pick. But I really had to pick this one because it is a very famous, very iconic episode, and we got to talk about it. The name of the episode is Isn't It Romantic? And it's from season 2. It's episode 5, number 29 in the series. It was written by Jeffrey Dutille, directed by Terry Hughes, who was the primary director at this time. Has guest star Lois Nettleton, and it aired on November 8th, 1986.
I'll never understand what Jean doesn't see in the opposite sex, but hey, if that's what makes her happy, that's fine by me.
There's one other thing.
Jean thinks she's in love with Rose.
Rose? Jean has the hots for Rose? I don't believe it. I do not believe it.
I was pretty surprised myself.
Well, I'll bet. To think Jean would prefer Rose over me? That's ridiculous.
Blanche, please.
Now you tell me the truth. If you had to pick between me and Rose, who would you pick? Who?
Blanche, pull yourself together.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does Rose know?
No.
Oh, good. I don't think you ought to tell her. After all, she's not as worldly and sophisticated about these things as I am.
Absolutely. If she finds out Danny Thomas is a lesbian, it'll break her heart.
Before we talk about this episode, Brad, I had a little question for you. And this is a little tidbit. What other iconic TV show that we have talked about very recently, there's your hint, did Lois Nettleton guest star on, in which she also fell in love with a major character? Just the TV show.
St. Elsewhere?
No, you had a shot. Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Oh.
Lois played the new station manager who fell in love with Lou Grant. So in this episode, she's falling in love with Betty White. So she fell in love with both Lou and Sue-Ann. I think that's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. So anyway, yes. So this is the famous episode about Dorothy's friend Jean, who is a lesbian, and they don't know if she should tell the other girls about it. Sophia says, the lesbian thing, do you keep it under your hat or not? And they decide not to tell them, except Jean falls in love with Rose. And this episode, I just want to say a little bit about this episode, because I picked it because it's really an iconic episode, but I think I picked it really because it's probably Rue McClanahan's most famous and brilliant scenes ever as Blanche, which is a lot to say, because Rue McClanahan has had some stunning, stunning scenes as Blanche. But I think we'll get to what that scene is in a minute. But I also want to say that this is actually the highest rated Golden Girls episode ever.
Really?
Yeah, it tied. It tied with the episode Ladies of the Evening, which is the one with Burt Reynolds at the very end, and was the second episode of the season. So these were the two highest rated shows of Golden Girls ever. It also won some Emmys. It won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Directing of a TV Series. That was Terry Hughes. Lois Nettleton was nominated, as was Jeffrey Dutille. And I really feel that this episode is the reason that Rue McClanahan won the best actress in a comedy that year, because Betty White had won it for the first season. This was Rue's season, and then Bea Arthur won it the following, and Estelle Getty won Best Supporting the following. So this was the episode they submitted, and how can you not? Because it is the episode with the most iconic line ever. Lesbian. Isn't Danny Thomas one? Not Lebanese, Blanche, lesbian. Because what happens is that the girls decide that they need to tell Blanche. They're giggling in the room. Sophia and Dorothy are giggling in Dorothy's bedroom, talking about the fact that Jean has the hots for Rose. And Sophia says, Blanche wants to know what they're laughing about. And she goes, well, for starters, Jean's a lesbian. And she goes, what's so funny about that? I've never known any personally, but in Danny Thomas one? And Dorothy goes, not Lebanese, Blanche, lesbian. And Blanche says, lesbian. Lesbian. And then it occurs to her what a lesbian is. And in Blanche's mind, she just can't understand why someone wouldn't like a man. A man's got so much more to offer. You know what I mean, Dorothy? But that's not it. That's not the pièce de résistance. Blanche is fine with the fact that she's a lesbian. She's like, hey, whatever makes her happy. It's fine. Who cares? And she goes, that's not all. Jean thinks she's in love with Rose. And Blanche, being Blanche Devereaux, is not shocked that she's a lesbian, but she's shocked that the lesbian is not attracted to her, but attracted to Rose. It is the brilliant work of Rue McClanahan. I mean, that's what makes it so funny. She doesn't know what a lesbian is. She doesn't care. She only is concerned with the fact that somebody is more attractive to someone else than she is. And I think that is just that's character comedy for you folks. That's not one-liners. That is deeply rooted character comedy, and it's what makes this episode so damn funny.
Well, when she says lesbian, the look on her face and the tone in her voice was so perfect. It was great. And yeah, the fact that she was so offended that Rose is the one that she had a crush on rather than Blanche was so funny. Now, do you know what TV show somewhat copied this years later?
Tell me. Years later, tell me.
There is an episode of Will and Grace where, Woody Harrelson is dating Grace.
Yeah.
And Woody goes with Will to a bar, a gay bar. Mm-hmm. And this guy hits on Will. And Woody is so offended that the guy assumed that he and Will were not a couple.
That's right. I remember this.
And he would step in and do that. Yeah, so it's very similar.
Yes, that is kind of a call out. It is kind of a call out. No, but that whole scene with the lesbian and Lebanese is so brilliant. It was one of Rue McClanahan's favorites. I think I might have said that.
Yes.
Her other favorite was another brilliant thing from the last season, from Journey to the Center of Attention, when she does the Michelle Pfeiffer Fabulous Baker Boys takeoff on the piano when she's singing. Another brilliant one. But yeah, it is so well written. And some of the other iconic lines here. This is also this episode where it's raining outside and Blanche says, I do love the rain so. It reminds me of my first kiss. And Dorothy says, oh, your first kiss was in the rain. And Blanche says, no, it was in the shower. I mean, it's this character comedy. This is all this brilliant character comedy.
That was iconic. She never held back.
She never held back. For people who don't know who Lois Nettleton was, she was a very busy TV and film actress. As I said, she played Mary Tyler Moore. She was on a lot of soap. She did a lot of miniseries. And she was told she needed character advice on how exactly to play this character, because this was a first, ladies and gentlemen. This was actually the first time the Golden Girls had touched on the subject of homosexuality since the pilot, since Coco, since The Fancy Man. And so this was really important. And this is one of the reasons why this episode is so important, is because this episode got praise when it was on for its sensitive and non-sensational portrait of an LGBTQ person. And that is thanks to the director, the writers, and Lois Nettleton, because she plays Jean. She plays Jean totally, and pardon the pun, straight. There are no embellishments. There are no stereotypical things. She's just a nice kind woman. And that is what's so wonderful about this episode, is Jean's another person. She's just another person who falls in love with one of the Golden Girls. End of story.
Yeah, and there's two things I really liked about this episode. The first one is they stepped away from the cliche sitcom thing, because typically on sitcoms, they did it on All in the Family and so many other shows, is if this had been written by anyone else, Jean would have showed up. Dorothy then would have been shocked to find out all this time that she had been a lesbian, and the show would have gone on from there. And that is not where they went. It was a breath of fresh air that Dorothy knew all along that her friend was a lesbian, and it was a non-issue. It's only an issue because...
And so did Sophia.
Yeah, that was the second thing I was going to bring up. But for Dorothy, it was a non-issue. The only issue was how will her friends take it, and basically, will they hurt her,
right,
her friend, not
right,
that she's ashamed of her. So I thought that was a nice change. And the other thing is, you know, Sophia calling Coco Miss Fancy Pants in the first episode, and she made some jokes about her, the lesbian in this show. Mm-hmm. But when it came right down to it, she just flat out said to Dorothy, you know, if one of my kids were gay, it wouldn't matter, something of that nature. And I was waiting for the punchline, and it didn't happen.
There wasn't.
And I was so happy.
No, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. The treatment was so respectful and so just matter of fact. Yeah, she's a lesbian. That's the way it is, people. Although Sophia does say she'd rather live with a lesbian than a cat. There you go.
Yes.
I love that.
Unless the lesbian sheds.
That I don't know. That I don't know. So yeah, it's a wonderful episode. Highly deserved all the praise it got. I think it's probably one of the hallmarks of the second season. The second season of Golden Girls was really, I think, its first peak. It was wonderful episodes. There are so many more episodes that we can't talk about because we don't have time that go on from this. There was some of my favorite ones, you know, in the third year. Yes, we have No Havanas. That's with Sophia's iconic Blanche put down, "Beat it, you 50-year-old mattress," which is one of my favorite put downs. There's a wonderful episode about Alzheimer's. There's that great Grab That Dough episode with Bea Arthur in that booth grabbing the money. There are so many episodes that it pains me that we can't talk about all of them. But I am glad we talked about the ones that we talked about in this episode, Brad. I think they're important.
I agree.
Well, that's about it for this episode of Golden Girls, unless you have something else you want to say, Brad, about the show or about the podcast.
Yes, I do have something to say. If you are new to this podcast, welcome. We love having you. Be sure to subscribe or hit follow so that you know when new episodes come out. And if you have been around a while and you're enjoying the show, if you're coming back, we assume you do, please do like the others we mentioned today and rate and review this podcast.
We would appreciate it. Having these new reviews is just, it gives me a new lease on life. Makes me feel good.
And I do have one more thing to say, Tony.
Okay. Go for it.
Thank you for being a friend.
Aw, isn't that sweet? Thank you for being...
Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant.
Aw, that's nice. Thank you, Brad, for being a podcast co-host, you know. But I guess that's all. And there's only one thing left to say. But I don't want to be a Connor knocking. So let's not say goodbye. Let's just say au revoir.
No, let's say goodbye.
Blow it out your tubing verbals. Goodbye, everybody.
For 100 points, complete this famous saying. Better late than...
Blanche. Pregnant.